Hi, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us today. As we get settled in and more people come into the program, I hope you'll share in the chat where you're joining us from and also what you're hoping to learn today. Welcome to today's program, Tips for Journalists, How to Access and Customize the LexisNexis database. My name is Bara Vaida. I'm the Director of Training for the National Press Club Journalism Institute. We're based in Washington, D.C., and our nonprofit organization provides training and support for journalists with the mission of powering journalism in the public interest. I'm so glad to welcome you all to today's program. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We have a closed caption option available. And if you're joining us on a desktop or a laptop, you can enable this at any time by finding the live transcription button and the navigation menu at the bottom of your Zoom window. We're recording this program, and a link will be emailed to you later on today. The recording will also be included in our Monday's newsletter, the latest. If you aren't already subscribed to our afternoon newsletter on the media, we'll add the link to the chat now, so please sign up. And today's program is designed to be both a conversation and a training, and so we hope you'll join in with your thoughts and questions in the Q&A box. We recommend putting them there so they don't get lost in the chat. We'll be monitoring them, and I'll be asking some questions to Brad as we go out throughout this program. So I want to turn this over to our fantastic instructor today, Brad Hamilton. Brad is an award-winning reporter, writer, and editor with more than 30 years of experience in investigative journalism and features. He serves as editor-in-chief at the Hatch Institute, and it's a nonprofit dedicated to investigative journalism. Thank you so much for leading this program today, Brad. We're so grateful. I'm going to have you take it away from here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vara. And I'm thrilled to be here presenting on LexisNexis and how to use it for your reporting. Just wanted to quickly note that this nonprofit that I run, the Hatch Institute, does help journalists. We support journalists in different ways. So if you need help, you can reach out to us. And I also run a program for LexisNexis or regarding the LexisNexis, and I can talk about that at the end. So today, what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at LexisNexis, and I'm going to show you some tips on how to do it, how to work it to your advantage and make the most of what's there. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you what it looks like here in case you have not seen it or are unfamiliar with it. All right, so here we have, this is the power search. Now, let me just show you, this version of LexisNexis that we're going to be looking at is the paid for version. Okay, you can get a free one at the library or through your university. Of course, members of the Press Club also have access to this at the Press Club itself. So if you're there, if you happen to be there at the building, you can get this and use it. And this particular screen right here is where everyone should start. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with LexisNexis, it's a massive database of articles, archives, and other information. It's used by most media companies across the globe for research and for reporting purposes. And so this is really an amazing resource, but it is a little bit difficult to use if you are not familiar with it. And so that's where we're going today. That's the whole point of gathering today, is to show you how to use this. All right, so the starting point is always going to be the power search page. You can see this tab over here, power search, and this is the page where you're going to do all your searches. All right, now when you're searching for articles, there is a humongous number in here, many, many hundreds of millions of articles. They go back to the 1960s and 70s. And there's roughly 10,000 publications here. So it's a lot of material, but unlike Google, it is not an intuitive search engine. It doesn't interpret what you're asking for. So you have to be very specific in what you ask for. And if you ask for something general, like say Donald Trump, you're going to be overwhelmed by articles. Most of them are not going to be articles that you're interested in. So the key to using this is going to this Power Search page and using the 4 options here that will winnow down your search, that will narrow the number of articles that you get so that they are reasonable and manageable, but also that they're all on point, exactly what it is that you are looking for, your subject that you're researching. All right. So here you've got four different ways of winnowing it down, creating that narrowing field so that you're getting appropriate material. Okay. Now you always have to start when searching here in this open box here where it says enter search terms and connectors. And by that, it means you must try to think of a word or a phrase that is likely to appear in an article that you might want. So it could be something like Donald Trump. Again, you're going to be overwhelmed. So you're going to have to start thinking about more specific terms that relate to your area of interest. All right. So, just to give you an idea of how quickly you can winnow things down, let's say you started with Donald Trump is your first search term, but then you add an additional term like, say, Trump Tower Moscow or something very specific, right? So you are going to now eliminate 99% of all the Donald Trump articles because you've added this one additional element. All right, so the more that you add of these things, the fewer number of hits you're going to get. And a typical search string will be separated by the word and, which means that all of those terms have to be there, this term and that term and that term. And if you're using a term that is more than one word, like a name, right, or a particular phrase like, global warming or something like that, you want to put it in quotation marks so that this search will capture those words in that exact order. Okay, so you can see down here, there's a little mini tip sheet here on using connectors, right? The exact phrase put in quotation marks and means that they both have to, at least 2 of them have to be there. Okay, now sometimes you'll do a search and you will get not that many hits, right? You put in all the different terms and words that you think might appear in the article, you're only getting like a handful, which isn't super helpful, right? So instead you might do or, this term or that term, and each time you add another term separated by the connector, or you're expanding the number of hits that you get. The ideal for me is about like 200 or so is a good number. Like if you get 200 articles and they're all exactly on point, exactly what you're after, then you can read through those and you can quickly become an expert on your field of study and whatever it is that you are reporting on. All right, there are a couple other ones here that I'll get into later, but that's the basic starting point. You got to put in something here into this first box. All right, the option number 2 for winnowing down your hit list, as it were, the roster of articles that pop up, is the index terms. Okay, so instead of thinking of a word that might appear in the article, you might want to think of a way to describe the article. Like this article is mostly about politics, or it's mostly about the oil and gas industry. Okay, so you might want to apply one of these index terms. They're kind of like SEO tags, if you will, but they're helpful in terms of, again, narrowing it down so that you're getting exactly the area of interest. Okay, so if you look here, like you can type in a term here that you might be interested in, or you might think it would be appropriate to your search, or you can just go down to this little link here where it says subject. Okay, so subject terms gives you some ideas. Okay, all right, well, is this an article about business, or is it about education or the environment? Okay, maybe it's about a legal matter related to your search. Okay, or if you can't think of one, like maybe it's an entertainment story. I don't know. Entertainment. What kinds of things pop up? Oh, maybe it's an arts and entertainment sector thing, right? So you can click on that, and then you can add it here, and it'll pop up in that box, right? And you select it and add it, and now you've added this tag, which will help you identify where you're going. So, for example, in the thing that I gave before, Donald Trump and Trump Tower Moscow, okay, well, that could be related to Russia. It could be related to government and public administration. It could be related to the hospitality industry. So that's where you would put your tag right in there, that index term. By the way, these index terms, you'll see them at the bottom of every single article. They're in all caps, and it's AI essentially. LexisNexis is identifying how much of this article relates to what subject. So you'll see it at the bottom. It's like, oh, this article is 91% about, I don't know, let's say business, or it's 90% about public administration, the government essentially, or politics, right? So you can do all of those things, and that's very helpful. Option number 3 is the date field. This is also extremely valuable. It defaults here, as you can see, to all available dates, which often is really not the most advantageous option, okay? Unless you're going to the Wayback Machine and you want to look at something from the 1980s or something like that, you're not really generally going to use this as an option. So the drop-down arrow gives you other defaults, like, oh, only today or last week or in the last 3 months, okay? So you can select the time frame that you want, or you can customize it to a start and a stop date, right? So, I mean, I had one person who was looking into the Columbine massacre and wanted to look at only the original reporting from when it first happened, which was, I believe, in 2000. And so he went to here and he started. I think it was June. So June 1, 2000 to June 30th, right? 2000. So that's just in that month is when you'll get those articles. And I have to say that also this date field thing is fantastic if you are trying to identify big anniversaries, which is something that I advocate for, right? So you're looking for something that happened that was a big story in your beat 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? So you can identify, that time frame and start looking for articles that happened, in that particular era, that particular time frame of a decade ago or whatever it is. And basically, it's a way of generating story ideas. All right, now the fourth and final option on this page is the sources field. This is amazing. The sources field is essentially publications, and we're talking about newspapers, magazines, trade journals, a whole array of sources that are massive and will also not be familiar to most of you. Sure, some of the name brand ones are there, right? Vanity Fair, the New Yorker, the New York Times, but lots of other smaller publications that can be helpful to you. And I'll give you an example. So let me just start right here with this. I'm going to do this, TRANS, okay. Transcriptions, there's huge volume of these transcriptions. What are transcriptions? Well, they're pretty much any broadcast news program from the major networks, cable networks, radio, local television, right? Many of these places, most of them, in fact, do record their news programs and then they transcribe them. So you can tap into this by selecting all news transcripts, and then you're getting a vast array of transcripts. However, you can also specify, look at this one down here, ABC News transcripts. Okay, so that's just from that network. And if you want to look into it, you can click onto this little eye right next to it, and that little eye will pop up and it will show you what's behind it. Okay, what do you actually get if you select ABC News transcripts? Well, it goes back to, you can see here, 1979, right? And it updates once every week. And these are all the shows. It says publications, but these are the shows. 2020, Good Morning America, Nightline, all these different things. As you can see, it goes down to World News Tonight with Diane Sawyer and Peter Jennings. So it goes way back. And that's just one of the many transcripts that you'll get. All right. So another one that I really like that's also transcripts is this one, CQ. See this one here, CQ transcriptions. CQ, by the way, when you select it, you'll see it pops out, right? You can see it goes from the search field to a selected one. And you can pile these things together. I mean, you can put 10 or 12 of them together if you want. That's a really great way to sort of customize your search. Just to give you a quick example, a woman I was helping with her, she needed help with her work, and she was asking me about coastal flooding. She wanted to do some research on coastal flooding, and she only wanted big city newspapers from areas that had, coastal exposure. So as she thought of them, she just typed them in here: Miami Herald, whatever, Los Angeles Times, Tampa Bay Tribune. As she thought of them, typed them in there, saw them, selected them, and then they bounced out like you see here in this oval, right? And at the end, she had about 30 different big city newspapers that are all linked together in essentially it's a group source search. Okay, now why do I like CQ transcriptions? Well, this is basically everything that's said in Congress, in congressional testimony, in bills that are being debated, there's markup language, there's all kinds of stuff that happens where people are testifying and saying something, and Congress is recording it and transcribing it. All right. So one of the reasons this is valuable is that members of Congress often will have an issue come up in their district. Constituents are complaining about something like, I don't know, let's say like a power plant has just opened, in the area, and constituents are complaining to this member of Congress about it. Well, what that member of Congress might do is to commission a study on their own. Well, we need to look into this. They'll send out staff, they'll collect information, and then they will use that information to testify. Maybe they want to propose a bill, or maybe they want to, sort of essentially weigh in on this subject. You're essentially then, by getting the CQ transcriptions, you're tapping into this sort of congressional research that's been done and has led to someone saying something in a session. All right, so I'm going to erase that. Another one that I really like is Newsbank. Newsbank. So Newsbank is a collection of very local sources. We're talking about small circulating weeklies and dailies that you can isolate and search just under that banner. Okay, and it's pretty robust. The Newsbank sources are amazing. Let's just give you an example here. California news sources. Let's take a look at that. California news sources. Okay, what are these? Well, okay, there's a lot of them. It looks like, well, let's sort of scroll through them. Look at all of these. All of these different local newspapers across the state of California. I don't know, how many are there? What, 50, 60, 70? I don't know. There's a ton of them. So when you're tapping into this, you are really researching these local sources. And I find that that's super valuable. I mean, I don't know if anyone here is a Rachel Maddow fan, but during the early part of the pandemic, she was doing some really great stuff that was based on this. So like she was doing stories about a meatpacking plant in South Dakota, for example, that had a big outbreak of the virus. And how is she getting that? She's doing it by Newsbank, and then let's see, South Dakota. There it is, South Dakota, right? Right. So these are valuable in lots of ways. One way that I do like to do a search using Newsbank is when I'm backgrounding somebody. And backgrounding means essentially looking for, negative news about people. So guess what? Negative news. Okay. Negative business news, negative personal news. Okay. These are the only two things in the sources field that are not actual. There's no magazine or newspaper called negative personal news. Instead, what it is a customized search string that LexisNexis has created that will help you identify articles that are negative in nature about a person or a company. Okay, so let's say you select negative personal news. Well, what is behind it? What is the search strings? It's a whole series of different words like arrested, arraigned, indicted, alleged, accused that would typically appear in a story that doesn't reflect very well, let's say, on the person involved. Okay, so you can combine negative personal news with, let's say, Newsbank Ohio. I don't know, I'm just saying that. All right, so let's say you do those two things. Now you know the person that you're backgrounding is from the state of Ohio, and you're asking the service to actually try to find articles from the local press that were negative in nature about that person. Okay, so in this particular case, the person's name would be up here in the search field, Joe Johnson, right? And then here you're using these two sources to try to find out stuff from him, his past, or basically whatever might have popped up in the past. Okay, I will point out that the negative business news option there that you see there, right? The negative business news option is a little different from the personal one because it includes like, SEC action and stuff like that, regulatory things, right? Whereas the personal one has things that wouldn't relate to a business, such as like DWI and domestic violence. Okay, so I've sort of scrolled through very quickly these 4 options, and I'll stop for a second to see if there's any questions that Bara might want to interject here.
Okay, thanks, Brad. There was one question about the difference between LexisNexis and Factiva. This person said, in using LexisNexis over the years, I found it has become less useful and turned to Factiva more often. So I wanted to know the advantages of LexisNexis.
LexisNexis and Factiva are competing services. So news organizations will sometimes have one or the other or both. So Factiva is run by Dow Jones. LexisNexis is run by Reed Elsevier. So they're just basically different services, and not all of the articles that you might want from the whole world that's out there are going to be found on both of them. For example, LexisNexis does not have the Wall Street Journal. It has some material, but not the full access to all the Wall Street Journal articles. And that's because Factiva is run by Dow Jones and Wall Street Journal is a competing news service. So they do differ. And it's just really both kind of work the same way. You have to be able to know how to search on them, and you're tapping into all these archived articles, many of which are paywall protected. All right, so I want to just show one other quick thing here, because when you're learning how to search, you really have to become familiar with these connectors. Okay, we talked about quotation marks are exact phrase, and means both these terms that you're searching will have to be there. Or means it has to be either one or the other. And not is another one. It seems like what am I using that for? Well, and not is a good knockout. So, for example, I'll give you a good example. One of my favorite authors on the subject of beer is the late great British journalist Michael Jackson. Okay, so if I'm researching beer, I might do Michael Jackson in quotes because it's his name, so 2 words, and beer, and lager, and not singer or recording artist, right? So then that means that it was knocking out all of the Michael Jacksons from Thriller fame. Okay, now there's also a cool little cheat sheet down here that will give you some more insights into how these connectors and commands work. And I'm just going to scroll through these quickly so I can get to it. Okay, this is the tip sheet here, if you will. I'm not going to go through all this, but basically there are a couple of things that I do want to point out. Okay, we talked about and not, or. Now you get to these things down here that are W /. So what is that? Okay, well, one thing that can help you when you're searching is if you make sure that the search engine knows you're looking for your terms to be near each other within close proximity, because that heightens the chance that the article will really be about those 2 things. So, for example, if you did Donald Trump and Trump Tower Moscow, you might get Donald Trump like sort of a story about his impeachment or his trial or whatever. And at the very bottom of the story, it says, yeah, and also remember he got in trouble. He tried to build that hotel in Moscow and it didn't work out. Well, your 2 search terms are certainly in the story, but they're not near each other, which means that this article really isn't about something that you want to hear about. You want to hear specifically about those 2 terms. So you want to draw them together in proximity. And what you do is, instead of using the word and, A-N-D, you would do term 1 and then W /, which stands for within. So W /P is within the same paragraph. W /S is within the same sentence, or you can get fancy with it and put a number there, W /30 or 10 or whatever, meaning those 2 terms have to be within 10 or 20 words of each other. All right, I'm also going to show you a couple things down here. This is one I like over here, byline, byline. So let's say you're looking for stories just by a particular reporter. You type in byline right here like this, and then you put the reporter's name in parentheses. So you want to see every single article that Bob Woodward ever published. Bam, there it goes. You put his name in there. All right. And then another one that I like is HLEAD. So the terms that you're searching for both have to appear in the headline and the lead paragraph. And there are other ways that you can tweak this, like the length of the article or like sort of section of a newspaper or whatever. Right? So I'm not going to go through all this, but it's worth looking at because there are some cool tips and things that you can do in here. One more thing before I leave is the use of the exclamation point. That can be pretty handy. So that's called a root word expander. So let's say you're talking specifically about whether or not someone was ever arrested. So you're going to talk about that person. You do a search on their name and the word arrest. So the article could say arrest, could say he was arrested. You could say the police were in the process of arresting him. So instead of trying to capture all of those words, you just do arrest with an exclamation mark at the end, and then any other word that might come with a letter that would come after that is included. You see the example there, insure, insured, insurance. Okay, so that's this little tip sheet. And by the way, I'm going to show you a quick way to get to it. It's right here. If you can see this, there's a little question mark with a circle in it. And if you click onto that, you can get these support resources. If you look into that, there's this PDF guides, and there it is down there. That's search commands, a thing that we were looking at. That's a cheat sheet. All right. So those are the basics. And I will say that when you get started with this, it's a little strange because it's not just, like Google searching. You have to be more specific. It's almost like, you're a computer and you're asking a computer to do something, and it's very, very narrowly tailored to what you want, and it behaves exactly like a computer because it takes what you've given it and it does just that and nothing more. But once you get the hang of it, and that means just basically doing as many searches as you can, it becomes much easier and quite productive. Now I'm going to vault out of this page. Like I said, for the most part, your searches are going to be on this power search page, but there's these other tabs over here. And now I'm going to go to the sources.
Brad, before
Yes.
we hop in
Yep.
to the next section, there's been some questions about what kinds of things you can find in LexisNexis, such as court documents, scientific journals, questions like that.
Okay,
And
sure.
also, there's another question about how the database features older stuff. So things going back before the 90s, I think, how that works.
Sure. Okay. So I'll answer the last question first, which is it really depends on when publications license this material. So essentially, how this works is like, okay, so the New York Times licenses its content to LexisNexis. And so it sort of depends on when they started doing that. And many of these publications now are going back farther into their archives. They're uploading, microfilm, for example, or they're just digitizing their material. And so it sort of depends on the publication. I've seen things for LexisNexis, it generally goes back to like the earliest is going to be like the sort of the early 70s. I've seen articles in the Times from the 70s for sure, right? So it just depends on the on the particular publication and when they started uploading all of their content. So, and as far as the other question goes, it's let's see, how can I answer this? I think that when you're searching, it's actually just ask the question again, because I think it will help focus exactly what I want to say here.
Court records and scientific journals.
Yeah, so there are two things that you don't get even in this paid for version. The court records and the what LexisNexis calls accurate, which is public records, those are not included. They are very expensive. Court links is generally for law firms. Okay, so it's kind of like these are professional organizations pay for them. They pay a lot of money, $300, $400 a month, just for court records, for the court links service. That's what court records is called under LexisNexis. And LexisNexis also has this public records thing, which is also $300 to $400 a month. So those are not included here. However, when it comes to scientific journals or any kind of industry-specific trade journals and what have you, there is a massive amount of material here, and much of that is paywalled. And this is where you can really gain a lot of value. And it's a good transition, because if you go into the sources field here, this is actually where I was going anyway, right? This is where you find those niche publications. Like I said, most of these publications you have never heard of before, okay? And you can see how many there are. If you look over here, sources, narrow by, and you'll see this is the roster here, okay? One thing that looks pretty good here is biographies, 158. That is not 158 biographies of people. That is 158 publishers of biographies. Who knew there were that many? But there's a robust array of published biographies that you can look into. And then there's a handful of other stuff. And then, but look at the big one here, news, 11,000. It's now over 11,000 news sources, right? So that is a lot of publications, and many of them are niche, industry, trade specific, all right? So just to give you an idea of how this can be useful, I had a woman who wanted some help. She was newly assigned climate change beat. She wanted to know, like, are there any publications that cover climate change specifically? So I said, well, I don't really know all of them, but let's go to the sources page. So this is where we're at, the sources page. And as you can see, all of these letters of the alphabet up here allow you to jump to that alphabetical listing and start looking through sources and seeing if anything. So obviously we're going to think about C as climate, right? That's the first inclination. You could do C as climate change, right? And of course, over here where it says search within sources, you can just type in climate, right? But I recommend coming here occasionally and just goofing around a little bit and looking at what's there, because it might suggest things that you have not thought of. All right. So this woman says, I'm doing climate change. What can I do? How can I tap into these industry-oriented sources? Okay. So we're going to look at this, like start looking through these. As you can see, these A's are all here. So just, we'll look at the A's. And look at this guy right here. This is what, about 10 or 12 down. AARP, the magazine, right? We're not thinking about that at all. But guess what? The AARP magazine is awesome. It's the largest circulating magazine in the country. And it's, staffed by some people who are really talented, including a bunch of investigative journalists. So since retirees tend to wind up at places that are, near the water, they've done some pretty interesting reporting on climate change. So, okay, well, we hadn't thought about that. So let's select, or we're not going to select that. We know what it is. We'll just jot it down. This is what this one did. Okay, AARP, the magazine. We're going to remember that. So now let's start by just going to the C's, right? And you'll just sort of see how many there are. All these different C's. We're at CA. We're looking for climate change, right? So we're going through these CAs, and ooh, look at this right here. California Energy and Climate Report. Okay, we didn't think about California, but there it is. Okay, and then we keep going down. We're still looking for climate, CAM, CAM, CAN. We keep going all the way down, and we get into the cancer publications. Look at all those cancer publications. All right, we're continuing down, still looking. Okay, so we only found that one California thing, but now we're going to go to the second page. This is, of course, the second page. C's, right? Still looking for climate, right? But as we do, look at this. Carbon and Climate Law Review, Carbon Control News, all right? There are a huge number of carbon or climate related, and then we just keep going and we're going to find a whole bunch more. I'll give you a spoiler. There's like Clean Air and Clean Energy Report. There's all these different things that don't have climate in them as a title of the publication, but definitely do have an orientation to that subject. So now that we've gone through all of those C's, just goofing around and finding stuff, now we can go back and do a proper search under search within sources. So let's do climate. Let's see what we get. There's that, we know about that one, Carbon and Climate Law Review, Climate Change Daily, all these different Climate Wire, Inside Climate News, EPA, there's an EPA, Climate Extra, International Journal, a journal. There's all these different publications that specifically talk about climate change. Okay, so what does that do for this woman? Okay, let's just go back for a second to the power search. Okay, so she's looking for climate change. She could put climate change in here as a term, again, in quotation marks, and maybe another area specific interest of hers, right? So she can do that search. And then what she's going to do, she's going to do another search to the sources and start typing in all of those publications that we found that could be helpful to her. All right, she can do it that way. And then once she goes through, a bunch of articles, she might find, guess what? There was one or two really talented reporters, working for a climate change newspaper or magazine. And then she can go back up here. And let's see here. Let's go back up here. And she can do that byline search that we looked at. Byline of this person, right? Jennifer Johnson, right? She's been great on this. And then you look at all the articles that Jennifer Johnson has written on climate change. And now what you're doing is you're tapping into a journal, let's say, that is oriented only to professionals, executives, let's say researchers, academics, right? And you're getting all kinds of information from that kind of that high level, but information that is not generally circulating in the public, right? So it becomes a lead generating option. You're typing in these different things. You're finding all these articles that this one reporter has done, and then you can set up a search. So whenever that person publishes anything, then you get sent that information to your inbox, and it's like a way of essentially developing tip sheet for yourself. Okay, so let's go back to sources for a second and see if there's any questions about what I was talking about just now.
No, I think the questions that have come up are related to finding contact information, which I think you're planning to get to.
Yeah, I am. Actually, that's a good segue because that's my next one. I love this part of it. Let's go to the biographies page. Here's the biographies page. Okay, this is that page where, remember, I told you there was 100 and whatever, 52 or 58 or whatever it is, published publishers of biography. So when you're doing a story about somebody, or you just want to find out some background information, it's always worth it to go into the biographies page, type in that person's name, and if it's a name like Bill Smith or something, you also have to say, and CEO of whatever Diamond Corporation or whatever, right? So then you can do a search on that person. And usually you'll find, if they're prominent, you'll find a whole bunch. You'll find different published biographies that will go well beyond what you see in Wikipedia. Not that I'm knocking Wikipedia, I love Wikipedia, but certainly, it doesn't have things like board seats, for example, or estimated net worth or things like that. So it's definitely worth it to try to find out, what you can learn from published biographies of an individual who you might be featuring. All right. But there's this other thing, and I have a hard time believing that for so long it was kind of very hard to find, and people didn't know about it, and people still don't know about it. But if you look on this biography page under popular sources, it looks like there's 3 of them, but there's actually just one. It's called the Contact References source. I call it the Contact Reference Database. And if you click onto that, the biography page recasts with your search term there, but now it's identifying contact references. So what is contact references? It's a collection of about, by my estimation, about maybe 800 million professional profiles. These are people who work doing whatever, their name, where they work, their title, how long they worked, their background, and also their work number and their work email. So it's incredibly valuable when you're trying to find people. Part of the way that they do this is they use web scrapers, principally a scraper called Zoom People. And what Zoom People does is it scrapes these profiles from all over, including LinkedIn, which is a big one, of course, but Indeed and other ones as well, plus company websites and government agency websites. Okay. So you're getting a huge number of people in there. So if you always just type in your average Joe or somebody like, or a low level official. I mean, I used this when my organization worked with the New York Times on a story. I needed to find out something about a bit of a scandal involving the EPA. So I needed to contact this guy who was kind of involved in the scandal. All I did was type in his name right in here and EPA, and bam, there was his work email and work phone number. All right. Work emails, by the way, are also pretty good because, now everybody works on their phone. So if you get a work email for somebody and you send them an email, guess what? It's in their phone. So they're looking at it right away. And within about 15 seconds, I had this guy's information. I had left a message on his phone, and I left him an email, sent him an email. All right. So one thing that's also very helpful with this contact reference thing is that you can type in like without knowing anybody, right? So let's say you're covering, I don't know, you're covering a beat, you're covering like sort of some industry, and a company winds up, getting sued, or the government takes regulatory action against this company, and you want to develop sources where you don't know anybody at this company, right? So you can type in the company name here and start looking through, people who work there. And it's just really easy to find people who work there, plus, again, all of the contact information about them. Another person who wanted to use this he did wind up using it. He asked me, hey, I have a book and I'm interested in finding agents of the FBI. I've never really done anything with the FBI, and I don't know anyone at the FBI. Can you help me find agents of the FBI? And so, of course, this is the place to do it. It's the biographies page where you identify and contact references. So we started by typing in here, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And then we saw, as we looked through the profiles, that the FBI agents, the active agents, all use the same email address, which happens to be ic.fbi.gov. All right, so then we changed our search to that, ic.fbi.gov. And let's see what we get. Look at that. You see this number? There's more than 10,000 profiles here. Some of them are going to be duplicates, of course, but 10,000 people who identify themselves as being FBI agents with their FBI email address right there, right? So just as I said before, when you're doing your search for articles, like 10,000 is going to be too many. 1 or 2 isn't going to be okay, but it's not going to be helpful. You kind of want to narrow it down a little so that you wind up getting a reasonable number. So I said to this guy, well, you're looking for FBI agents. Well, what specifically? Are you looking for, people who are like, doing, counterterrorism or involved in like narcotics, or what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking actually for FBI agents who live or work in the state of Minnesota. So we went down here to the search within results area, Minnesota, and you can add that. You can include it as an additional element. So you don't have to go back and do your whole search over again. You're just sort of winnowing down within this search results. So look at this. So we'll do that, hit that button, and see what we get. Look, so we went from 10,000 plus to 62. 62. Well, that's a reasonable number of people that you can look through. Like all these different people. Well, who are all these people? Well, they are FBI agents or former FBI agents who have some connection to the state of Minnesota. Let's check out this guy, Christopher V. Langert. Okay, so this is his profile. You can see they got this from Zoom People, right? And there's his email address right there. And it looks like he was a supervisor, a SAC they call, special agent in charge, through 2020, did some hostage negotiating for them. He was a captain in the Army. And if you look at this, there's all these articles down here about him. So even before you reach out to him, you can learn a lot about his experience and also his connection to the state of Minnesota. because you have those two terms, essentially the email address and the state of Minnesota. All right. So here's a little question. How would you find this guy now, since it looks like, at least according to this, that he retired left the Bureau in 2020, which actually could be helpful because now he doesn't work for the FBI anymore. Well, how would you do it? Well, you would go back to the biographies page. You would select contact references, and you would just type in this guy Christopher Langer without the at ic.fbi.gov. Okay, now I'm going to show you a couple of little things that are worth it. Once you start finding things that you want, there are all these different options over here. Okay, these little icons are ways that you can save stuff. Like, for example, you can open an FBI, you can open a new folder, which you can label my FBI sources, right? So this guy, Christopher Langer, would be the first person in that new folder. And this is an internal folder system, a filing system within LexisNexis that allows you to sort of group your articles and group your sources. There's also a printer icon. If you like to print it, you can email these things to yourself or to someone else. Very valuable. By the way, you can email something to someone who does not have a LexisNexis subscription, and they will see it because it goes as inline text. You can download it. You can upload it if you want to Dropbox or send it to the cloud OneDrive. Okay, so that's how you sort of capture stuff here. And as you're scrolling through these FBI agents, you might want to not have to go back to the big list. So you can go over here, and it helps you like flip through, right, to do like pages on a book. I guess there's 2 of them for Langer. And as you hover over the right arrow to the next hit, you see it's 10 of 62. Next guy up is Craig Sorum, right? So it just sort of allows you to go through these quickly. Okay, now I'll show you something else. This is the results list of what we had, right? 62 agents of the FBI who happen to be connected to the state of Minnesota. Well, what if a new person comes in? What if there's another person that comes in? Or like we did before with the woman who is setting up, searches for a particular reporter and wants to hear about anything that reporter is bringing to the table, right? You can set up this little alert over here, and then you basically title it, and then you can create an alert that is based on all of the things that you did to get to that point. By the way, you do have to go to this deliver thing before you can actually do it. It's asking you, well, how long do you want me to run the search for, right? And also, where should I send it when I get these results? Okay, this is a great way to just have stuff flow into your inbox that you have already been interested in.
Actually, can we follow up on that? On that vein, can you set up the LexisNexis database so that you can get latest articles sent to you via
Of course.
for something specific?
Sure, of course. Okay, I'll give you a little, here's a little quiz. Nobody ever passes this because it's just something that you would only know after you've been doing it a long time. So let's say you've just gotten hired as a political reporter. Okay, it's a political season, presidential election, all that. You got hired as a political reporter, and you want to get all of the political stories that have been published in the New York Times on a daily basis. So every day you want to wake up and have in your inbox all of the New York Times political stories. How are you going to do that? That is a tricky one. No one has ever been able to answer that question. All right, I'm just being me. What you would do is you would type in New York in quotation marks. Why? Because every New York Times article is going to have the word New York in it because the article comes up and says, oh, this was from the New York Times. All right. That obviates your need to try to figure out what the right search term might be for every single different political article. New York, because you know you're going to use the New York Times, and you have to start with at least one search term. So that's the answer there, New York. And then you would go into it and you check the subject field, right? And guess what? There is one that's perfect for this. Let's see, where is it? Government and public administration, right? That means anything having to do with the government or public administration. So of course, that is going to be political in nature. All right. And then you can do all available dates. You're going to do today. I want just today, right? So every day is a new day, and you'll get them each day, and your source is going to be the new. There it is, right there. Bang. Okay. So once you start that search, that's what you get. I do want to show you one other quick thing, which is the home page. And you're going to see all the stuff that I've been working on. Here's the home page. Home page is not for where you do searches. It allows you to do searches, but please do not search on the home page. Instead, it's for all your stuff, all the alerts that you've created, the history, all the documents that you've looked at, right? All these are the things that we looked at today, right? And of course, also the folders that you might have created, okay? So that's sort of the overview, and I'm ready for questions. Anything else coming up that needs to be addressed?
Well, one question was about cost.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's
Yes.
a couple of different tiers here to talk about.
Sure. Okay, so the cost for this, like I said, it varies. It can be completely free, but slow and clunky, and that would be the public library version. It can be free-ish as long as you are associated with a university. Sometimes people like from Columbia J School, they'll be able to keep their access for a while afterward, right? But you know, it's sort of iffy whether how long you can keep it, and also the university version is not quite this robust. Okay, then there's the paid for version, which is this one, and it used to be $100 a month, which nobody could afford if you were a freelancer. I don't say nobody, but it's pretty out of the price range of most people. And so what I did when I started this program, I wanted the people who were contributing to my foundation to have access to it, and I worked out a deal with LexisNexis so that it would be $19.95 a month, right? And that was 8 years ago, and now it's gone up to $26 a month. But it is an option, and I have this website set up for it. It's called Expert Access. So expertaccess.org is a way you can get it. And of course, if you're a member of the press club, you can get it once you are actually physically located in the building. You can get it there as well. So there's a lot of different ways of getting it. So that's what's going on. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question. Can any chance one can use, it's something called Accurint, ACCURINT,
Mhm.
on a
Yeah.
one-time
So as I
file?
mentioned before, Accurint is a brand name, I guess, if you would call it that, a brand name that LexisNexis has given to its public records service. Public records is kind of a misnomer. It's public records, but it is highly valuable private information about people. Generally, like home phone numbers and home addresses. Okay, sometimes it's cell phone numbers as well, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can get those things. Unfortunately, individuals are not allowed to have access to the LexisNexis Accurint service. Why? Because it's a liability issue. LexisNexis doesn't want people to be using it for, let's call it, non-professional reasons. And so if you want it, you have to form a company, you have to have liability insurance, you have to sign an indemnification agreement with LexisNexis, and drum roll, you have to pay about $350 to $400 per month just for Accurint.
Okay. There's another question that came in about how does LexisNexis basically verify does it vet the different publications that it includes in the database?
It does, aggressively so. In fact, that's one of the things that LexisNexis prides itself on. It has a whole team of people evaluating the content that comes in. So like everything from like blogs, there's blogs in there, we didn't even get to that. There are blogs, everything from like smaller publications. They are so meticulous, I guess, thorough in making sure that they're not putting up even licensed material that could be questionable in terms of its veracity or legitimacy, this is just like a nerdy thing to know, that if you are sued as a journalist, because you've got something wrong, you can use as an affirmative defense, meaning, okay, yeah, I did get this fact wrong, but I searched on LexisNexis and it's actually a viable defense because it's recognized as one of those premier outfits that does a good job of vetting its content.
Okay, there's another question again about freelancers, and if you're not a member of the press club, and what can freelancers do to get access to Lexis?
Well, again, that is the slide that I was showing there. Let me just go back here. I will share my screen again. This slide here. This is the landing page for the outfit that I run. This is like a separate little thing. It's called expertaccess.org. Let's see here if you can, I don't know if you can see it up here. Expert Access is the company name. It's expertaccess.org. And that is a website set up specifically for this program where you can get this for $26 a month. You have to pay for it for a year, but it's really easy to sign up. The way it works is that when you sign up, I run this program, which means that you pay through this portal. The money goes directly to LexisNexis. All of the money goes directly to LexisNexis, and then you get direct access to LexisNexis. So you would then see you would then see what we were looking at today.
Okay, great. I don't see any more questions. We just have a couple more minutes here. Brad, is there one, and I realize we only have a couple minutes here, but do you have sort of one kind of example of a story that you can share real quickly, how you found it via using LexisNexis if you didn't have access?
Oh my God, so many, so many good examples. I would say, well, okay, so I just know for a fact that using that contact reference database, to find experts in the field, to find people, who are associated, like for example, a company or any company or government agency that starts becoming newsworthy, right? You need to find people who work there now or did work there in the past. And of course, you can use you can use LinkedIn. A lot of journalists do. They go to LinkedIn to find people. That's great. But guess what? To get them to respond to you, you need to in-mail them, basically blind in-mailing somebody. And that's hard. Not that many people like, blind in-mail on LinkedIn. So it's much better to have a phone number and to have an address. I mean, I mentioned this story that I did with the Times, right? That was instrumental. I could not have gotten that quickly, that easily with bam, there's the guy from the EPA that I want to talk to, right?
All right, great. Well, thank you so much again, Brad, for this hour of instruction. I learned so much. I know participants did as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us today and for all the great questions, comments. We're going to share a link of this video later today, along with resources, so you can keep minding this hour of instruction for guidance. You can also reach out to me if you have any more questions as well. I just want to thank you again all for being here. We hope you'll join us for future National Press Club Journalism Institute events. We have a couple in June, so please check out our calendar. And we hope that you all stay well and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.